What does content mean?
Yeah.
No one can answer that question. And everyone uses it.
How does something become cool? Like, I'm not talking about advertising. I'm asking about how does it happen that all of a sudden a product or an actor or even a word is everywhere? Like, you cannot get away from it. The answer has to do with how culture gets made. And it's the single biggest and strongest force in our lives that no one talks about. You see, in the 90s and 2000s, we had these things called magazines, and we had blogs. They were run by art directors and curators. And these were people that were both producers of culture and also gatekeepers of it. If an actor wanted to be a big deal, he had to learn how to schmooze these people. If a brand wanted their product everywhere, they had to figure out how to get into these magazines. Single articles in magazines like Esquire and Rolling Stone changed entire decades of American public thought. Entire fortunes were made by centerfolds. Entire legacies created by covers. And then it all changed. It changed because of the internet. More specifically, it changed because of algorithmic social media. All of a sudden, we went from a world run by these gatekeepers and curators to a world run by the algorithm. All of a sudden, we were all the producers of content, and the algorithm was a curator and gatekeeper of it. This completely shifted the balance of cultural power in America. It shifted it from those people, the columnists and the curators, to the people who made the algorithm and the people that knew how to work the algorithm. And this changed everything. It has simultaneously fragmented and flattened our culture. Because see, the algorithm doesn't care if you change your mind. The algorithm isn't trying to introduce you to new genres of music. The algorithm isn't trying to help you build out your tastes or become a more interesting, well-rounded person. No, the algorithm wants to feed you whatever you already know and like. The algorithm just wants to push you deeper into whatever rabbit hole you're already standing in front of. As producers of content, we now pray to the proto-god of the algorithm. Songs are shorter now because that's what Spotify's algorithm wants. Every film on Netflix looks the exact same because that's what we think Netflix's algorithm wants. Every YouTube video has that same stupid thumbnail because somebody told these guys that that's what the YouTube algorithm wants. When you start to notice this phenomena, you see it everywhere. And that's why I wanted to have someone on that understands it really well. That's why I wanted to have on George McCalman. George is an artist, a columnist, and an illustrator based out of San Francisco. And for the last 30 years, George has stood in the inside of that machinery. George has stood on the inside of the American cultural industrial complex. He understands it really well. George worked at every major lifestyle publication of the 90s and the 2000s. And for the last 10 years, George has been making his own art and affecting our culture in his own way. George has really interesting, nuanced, thoughtful, funny opinions about our culture, how it's shifted, and everything that makes it so weird now. I love this conversation. I think you will too. With that, I bring you George McCalman. George, so one of the unusual, kind of uncomfortable, offensive sort of things that I have to do for this podcast is I have to study someone's entire life and then try to reduce it to one concept or one idea. And I guess first a complaint that you made my life very difficult because it's really hard to do that for your life.
Oh, great.
It's very hard to reduce your work
That makes me happy.
to one idea.
Mm-hmm.
But then this morning I had something and I ended up rewriting all my questions because of this. I found that so much of your life is this sort of extended meditation on who gets to be considered worthy, what gets to be considered worthy of being art, what gets to be a muse, who gets to be a muse. And I felt like I wanted to come in here and sort of do an hour-long meditation with you on that.
Great.
And just that idea, and I'm so fascinated by how your relationship with that has evolved. Let me start at the start. Take me to Grenada for a second. Tell me about what was the first thing that you remember finding beautiful? What was the first thing that you felt like, or maybe first person, that you felt had beauty to them?
That's a great question to ask me because my answer is the foundation of my craft. I grew up in a country that is one of the most beautiful places I have ever been to, that I consider one of the most beautiful places, because it is natural, it's lush, it's volcanic soil, so everything grows. It's also a very spiritual place. It's a place that is indigenous and African and European. And it's a lot of flavors that mix together, sometimes really uncomfortably. And it has produced a mood board for me that is pretty singular in its influence. It is it's the place that has inspired me the most, second to New York and San Francisco, where I live and have lived. And I would say that it's not necessarily a thing that is beautiful. It's my senses came alive as a kid. And one of the settings and moods that is the most evocative to me is listening to rain fall on a corrugated metal roof.
It's singular.
Singular.
Yeah.
Singular. And what that produces is all of my senses become alive. I can smell the earth.
Yeah.
It just like the earth raises to human level. And it's just I'm getting happy just thinking about it because my senses are alive just thinking about it. I can smell.
Yeah.
I can smell the soil, and it's the rain twisting leaves. And or if it's at night, then it's listening to thunder, lightning, feeling nature all around. And it's a comforting feeling of feeling small in the midst of nature doing what she do.
Yeah. Oh my God. If I was to, I guess if someone were to do a George McCalman style illustrated column of the visuals of your childhood in Grenada, rain on a tin roof is one. What are the faces that come to mind? What are the vignettes that sort of flush through your mind?
Well, the first vignette is the last vignette. It's my grandmother.
Yeah.
It's not my family. It's not my mother or my father. It's not my friends. It's my grandmother and her face, and the presence that she had in my life is also singular, and it looms over everything and everyone else. And her in her kitchen, her on the phone, her speaking patois so that I wouldn't understand what she was telling her friends.
Could you?
No.
Oh, at work.
No, she raised her children and grandchildren to not understand an aspect of her life. And only in the last few years of her existence did she then realize that she made a mistake. And belatedly tried to teach us patois, and none of it took. To her, I think it's one of the only regrets that she had in her life, that she was just kind of like, none of these bitches know how to speak my language.
Oh my God. Did you know then that, because you moved to America at 8, right? And when you were growing up in Grenada, at that point with your grandmother around with the rainfall on the tin roof, were you aware that this was a beautiful part of the world, that you were with a beautiful person? Or was that is that an after the fact?
It's an after the fact. It was after I moved to the US at the first time. My mother and I moved when the week I turned 9. And so it was a kind of crushing realization, because we moved to a place that was brick and concrete and cold and medicinal and institutional, which was Brooklyn at that time. A lot of brown and gray buildings, not a lot of greenery. We moved to a Caribbean neighborhood that is still one of the few original neighborhoods that exists pretty much intact in Brooklyn, East Flatbush. And so I hated it. I hated it. I hated New York for years because it wasn't just free. And I consider Grenada to be free. It's a place you can go and walk through the wilds and still feel safe.
Yeah.
You can still feel like I had one of those idyllic childhoods that my childhood was not idyllic, but there were pockets of an idealized way of being a child because I could disappear and come back and no one was concerned about my whereabouts.
Yeah.
And no one was concerned about my safety. And you could just be a child.
Yeah.
And you could create your own worlds and not have a sense of kind of looming horror around you.
Yeah.
And it was very instrumental in an aspect of my career that I think I don't necessarily think of myself as a fearless person, but my actions have shown me over time that I am when it comes to my sense of agency and me not waiting to get permission from other people to do maverick things.
Yeah.
I all of that comes out of my origin in Grenada.
See, this is the thing I'm interested in, because you end up going to, I guess I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but you end up going to this, like, is it medical school, right? High school.
Yes.
And
I was going to become a doctor.
but then you find yourself doodling on the edge of the books.
Well, that's a beautiful middle piece of the story.
Yeah.
The origin of the story is that my mother is the reason that I'm an artist. My mother and I had and it's a part of the interview that I probably will not talk about, which is my origins as a child. It was actually a really painful, dark, difficult time in my life. That is something that I will be writing about. I'm going to be writing a book about my origins eventually, but it's not something I've ever spoken about. And so there are gaps in the story as a result. And I'm making that clear in our conversation. There's an aspect of my life that I will not be talking about, not because it's too painful to talk about, but because I treat it as a very sacred thing. And it's not something that is usually a part of any conversation I have with anyone. But my mother and I, during those years where we needed to cling to each other, my mother titillated my senses. She would draw for me anything that I asked for. And it's one of my earliest memories is just shouting out random words as I was learning to speak them. And my mother would draw playing, and she would draw anything, a car, a bird. And my mother was a really gifted draftswoman that never created art again. And it's part of the tragedy of that period. There were a lot of really extreme things that were happening during those first 6-7 years of my life. And her ability to just create something out of nothing, I get tears thinking about it, was the start of that alchemy for me.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was magic. I've described it that way. It's like, that's when I learned that you could create something out of nothing that no one else had anything to do with. And that was just revolutionary to me as a child. And I became obsessed with drawing.
Yeah.
Obsessed. And so I drew on everything, everywhere, all the time. And by the time I got to high school, all of the inlines of every page in every subject were drawings, characters that I would create out of nowhere, I started reading comic books when I was 9 also, dovetailing with my time arriving in New York, Brooklyn. And I would just create whole worlds and create characters. And that was a lot of the kind of tangible forms of graphic storytelling, of art making, to tell sequential art that I started practicing without knowing how all the pieces were going to affect the rest of my life. But that's that I just started drawing, doodling all the time. It made my mother insane. Maybe.
Well, but you just touched on what I find, I guess, at a specifically very charming and fascinating about you and your life story, but also just generally about artists, is I think there's this sense that people have the beauty just presents itself to you. But I think you just said that about your mom, and this is, again, I find this to be a through line in all of your career and your writing and your art, is beauty also needs to be found, and it also needs to be brought out. And I think, well, I guess, what was that moment for you where you look at your own doodles and think, no, I need to be, the doodling on the side is the main thing. That's the real textbook. The rest is bullshit. When does that happen for you?
Well, it's something that I was a pretty solitary child. I would say I didn't have a lot of friends until outside of my family, my cousins. Until I was in high school. My oldest friend remains my best friend to this day. And she and I met the first day of high school. And we were both Caribbean kids that were meeting each other. And my neighborhood was a Caribbean neighborhood, but my school's location was a Jewish neighborhood. And so I was in a really small, specialized high school. And we were both there because we had extremely high grades. And it was a medical science, a technical high school that was supposed to prepare you to become an elite member of society. And we were all the immigrant kids whose parents had pressured them into assuming a role of responsibility. And it's like all the brown, black kids, and then all of the Jewish kids, and all the Asian kids.
Yeah.
And it was a small high school of 1,200 people, including the teachers. And it was one city block, a Midwood High School, right next to Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
And so we were all just in this really intensely competitive environment. And we just met and fell in love with each other. And we've been best friends. We've stayed best friends to this day. Very, very different people. And we just clung to each other.
Yeah.
We weren't socialized at that time. I was an athlete at that time. I ran track. But even there, I didn't find lots of camaraderie. And I was an only child, and I am an only child. I'm one of the only children in my family.
You were helpless.
I have a giant family. But it wasn't out of a sense of loneliness. It was a sense, because Pookie and I are the same. That's her name. It's actually her name.
A lovely name.
Pookie. And Pookie and I were pretty self-contained people. We really I grew up just having a sense of myself.
Yeah.
I didn't look around at other kids and think, I want to be that. I've always been that weird person who just looked inside of myself first. So I didn't grow up wanting to be anyone else. I grew up just really kind of always looking inside of myself to try and get answers before I engage the world. And she's very much like that also.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like, we'd be on the phone for hours with each other. We would watch television shows. We'd go to concerts together. We had a similar love of jazz and a kind of, a curiosity in so many things. And we just clung to each other during those days.
At what point did you decide, maybe it was in these conversations with Pookie, but when do you decide that you want to go to art school? And when do you make that switch where you're like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor? When did that happen?
Well, it was a big fallout with my family. You know, my family, up until recently, was not supportive of me becoming an artist. And I was very much on my own during those days. And Pookie played a large role in encouraging me. She was the only person around me who encouraged me. And my mother actively said that if I chose this path, then I would have to figure out my own path. And that was that's a sobering thing for a teenager to understand. I mean, I've known that since I was a boy, that I was on my own in so many ways. And I had made my peace with all of that. But I remember Karen really just encouraging me, like, no, don't give up. There is a path. But the truth is, at that time, there weren't a lot of models for Black artists to pursue a craft. It was just, I didn't know anyone, even publicly, just culturally, very, very different time. And for the younger folks who ask me about my origins, I just have to say that the world was just different.
Yeah.
It was not, young people can take social media for granted in that way, and that it just, the line between what you as an individual person want to do and seeing some model of it out in the world, there's so much more. Mm-hmm. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, that was just not there. So it was only a conversation with myself.
Yeah.
There weren't folks out there, there weren't artists that I looked at and admired. And I didn't want to be like white people. So I didn't grow up with just ooh, I want to do what, Don Rickles is to. No.
Yeah.
So there was not that kind of active cultural and fame-seeking dreaming that exists today, where it's just so common to have a wild wish for yourself and then see some version of it out in the world. And so I can't say that I felt lost in the wilderness, but I just knew I was charting a path for myself that didn't really involve anyone else.
Yeah, I think this is actually the part of your art school experience that I'm actually the most interested in too, because there's this subtle form of exclusion. Sometimes it's not so subtle, but in art, there's a subtle form of exclusion that happens, right? Which is again, who gets to be a muse? What is considered worthy of being painted?
Right.
Who is considered worthy of a portrait? Right. When did you become aware of that? Was it in art school? Was that after art school that you started to become aware? No. Every portrait I'm looking at is for a white person. Every person that's coming into class as a stand-in model is a white person. When did you become aware of that as a phenomenon?
Immediately, always.
Yeah.
I grew up in New York, and I think the only thing that balanced that out is that I lived in a Black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I lived in a Caribbean neighborhood. So I was surrounded by my culture and felt very settled and grounded, and felt very unsettled and ungrounded when I left my neighborhood. And my family, like so many immigrant families at that time, did everything they could to their children and grandchildren to remind them that they weren't Americans in the ways that American society told us that you were aspiring to be. So I didn't grow up wanting the American dream in the way that so many people are seek and chase. Mm-hmm. That I always had my own version of what I thought success was. And it wasn't anything that my white contemporaries were talking about.
Yeah.
I really just always followed my own path. And at that point, having so many years of relying on myself, it just became my status quo. It just became the way that I thought about any and everything.
Yeah, would you consider yourself a transcendental by any chance?
Tell me what that is to you.
Well, this might have to be another podcast then.
Yeah, you tell me what.
I'll tell you what specifically why I'm asking. Because as I was reading about your history, and I saw it mentioned in several places when you were in art school, you were also studying theology a lot, and you were studying philosophy. And I consider myself, I'm very partial to some transcendental thinking, but there's this idea, right, in transcendentalism of, I think it's originally from Plato, but this idea of you don't need to justify why you're doing something as long as it is in service of either the true, the good, or the beautiful. And people take that, especially in art, as almost a form of gospel, right? It's just like the true, the good, the beautiful. But what I find interesting about that is if we can't agree, as increasingly now, on what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful, then how can we agree on what is worth working on? What is worth the thing we're making art out of?
We can't agree.
Yeah.
That's it's true. There's a baseline that has to be agreed on societally in order for us to solve both simple and complicated challenges.
Yeah.
I grew up in a family, and there were about 20 years that I was estranged from my family. And during that time, I would say that I spent a lot of time getting to know myself all over again. It coincided with my time, the latter quarter of my time in New York, and a lot of my time in San Francisco. And I really used that time to really get to know myself again. Because for me, it was, if I'm not going to be inside of my family, if I'm not inside of a system, who am I?
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time and I got to relitigate those lines through that prism that you were just. I grew up in a family that works really hard. They're really hard workers. The simple pleasures in life are satisfying to them. We're a curious bunch. We are a spiritual bunch. There are a lot of teachers in my family. I am a teacher also. And my university experience was uncommon as an artist also, in that I was taught philosophy, theology, and history. And at the time, I thought my education sucked.
Yeah.
I hated it. And going to school in Queens for fine art and the trade of graphic design, I was like, how uncool am I?
Wow.
And I'm looking at all of these.
I literally cannot imagine a cooler existence.
Well, yeah, I mean, the second I got out into the real world, I realized that. But it was one of the only times in my life that I've looked over the fence in trying to set up how I was going to exist, how I was going to live, what kind of job I was going to have. I let myself, inside of my university experience, dream about what kind of artist I could be.
Yeah.
And then realized that I couldn't.
Yeah.
I realized that at that time in the mid-90s, there were a couple more, but no one that modeled the way that I wanted to be an artist. I knew I couldn't afford that existence. I didn't come from money. And there was no nest outside of any choice that I was making with myself. And I also, in most of my life, I've not discussed anything I'm doing with my family, with my friends, with my loved ones. I pretty much just make my decisions and then do it and then live with the success or failure of that. And because that's been my whole life, I saw no reason to live any other way.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated and started realizing that I was a thinking designer and that I saw critique and sought out the opinions and values of my contemporaries and the people that I worked with, and that I was entering into a way of working that was outside of just how I worked. I saw the value in that.
Yeah.
And I could rely on my way of being and my teachings to keep the momentum of what I was learning.
Yeah. I have.
That I would always be learning.
Hmm.
And that was a foundation of anything that I would do. And it is the foundation of everything that I do. I want to learn.
Yeah.
I'm a hungry learner.
You just touched on the thing that I'm actually I've been wanting to ask you the most about the most. There's this word taste, which if I hadn't said it yet on the podcast, I've been thinking it the whole time and preparing for this and as we've been talking. You lived this life coming out of art school that I think is not, you joined this industry that I think is not talked about enough.
Yeah.
Which is, and I'm so interested to get your thoughts on it and how it has sort of changed, how much it has affected how American society feels.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of people talk about the sort of 1960s Mad Men era of advertising and all that. To me, equally great, equally dynamic, equally interesting is the 90s and early 2000s era.
Absolutely.
Of the, let's call it the taste industrial complex.
It's true.
Right?
It's true.
And you joined right out of art school.
Yes.
You join the magazine world and you go out and you work for just about every magazine that had a say in what American life should look like, what American life should feel like. I'll start with a very open-ended question there. Going from feeling like an outsider and feeling like you were always on your own and never really feeling cool or beautiful, to all of a sudden you are behind, you are in the machinery that manufactures American cool.
Yes.
Right? That is responsible for dictating for all of us what will be considered beautiful and cool and interesting and in good taste and in bad taste and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Open-ended question. How did that feel? How weird was it? What did you learn? Just those, walk me through those, like, especially early years and maybe even like the heyday of the 90s magazine era.
Yeah.
What did you learn about how America defines what's cool?
Yeah. I could talk about this alone for the next hour.
Sure.
But I'm going to go back even further and frame a story that set that up, which is inside of our conversation, which is very much how I think about this thing. And I'm telling is very much how I think about these things, I should say, because I'm speaking plurally to answer your question. And you're going to see a little bit of how my mind works and how my mind works on a daily basis. St. John's University had this really maverick internship program at the time, which is how it's done now, but it wasn't done that way then. That the last semester would be on location. And you would report into work every day. And I interviewed at 3 different, very, very different practices. I went to a boutique design studio that had just a few people working there. I went to interview at a marketing firm, which at the time, one of their art directors was a Black gentleman who 20 years later I met and I'm friends with his son. And then the third was a magazine, a publishing house, and it was for Money Magazine. And in the week that I went to interview at all three, I realized that I saw my future in all three and that I had to make a decision about which one. And I could basically look forward and see what the next 10 years of my existence could be. And this kind of fantasy path that you could open a door and walk down a path. And I let myself not just think about the possibilities, but see what the reality of working in those locations and in those three very different. And I realized even then that I was looking at three halves of a whole and that I would eventually work in some version of all three. And that's what I've done.
Yeah.
And then in making a choice, I remember walking into the I can see it. I can see it as I'm telling the story. I walked into the Time Inc. building and walked into the Money magazine, and it was several magazines all throughout on different floors. And I walked in, and Erica Howard greeted me, and she was a Black woman, and her eyes lit up, and our eyes lit up at each other.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, thank God you're here." And I was like, "Oh, thank God you're here." And I went in to meet with Rudy, who was the creative director at the time. And we had our exchange. He saw my portfolio. I walked out and she said, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "I think so." And she said, "We need you."
Wow.
And that was it. And I looked around and saw the landscape, and it was a newsroom style office where there were people on the phone, there was shouting, there were meetings happening. The art board with the pages of the magazine were up in the art department. Is a classic. And it's the descendant of that Mad Men era.
Yeah.
They're very adjacent. One just has better PR than the other.
Yeah.
There are many shows about that era that glorify the racism and misogyny that are on the inside of that. But very few shows or movies chronicle that era of magazine making and storytelling. And it's to society's detriment because the best storytellers in the United States came out of that era. The best, period. And I know that I'm part of an elite training of storytelling, of the mechanics and the engineering of storytelling. I knew it at the time.
Yeah.
I knew that I was having an education that very few people ever get to have, and that I was alongside some of the other best storytellers.
Yeah.
And I've described it that we are sleeper agents throughout the world. And the tech industry very smartly has snapped up a lot of that talent because they know that. You don't work in a marketing firm and get this kind of education.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just don't. And what we gained at that time was a kind of rawness and an urgency around storytelling that was cultural, that we could learn something and then unlearn it and then relearn something else in the span of a week.
Yeah.
I call it military training. We learned how to create stories militarily. And I was just captivated.
Well, I find that my understanding of it, of course, I didn't live through it, but my understanding looking back of what happened, I guess at a broader level with American society, was, in the 50s and 60s, there was still this idea of advertising sat outside of storytelling. And of course, storytelling was used in advertising, but you brought an advertisement in.
Which is, by the way, one of the great bullshit analogies of that era.
Yeah.
We all believed it too.
Yeah.
That there was church and state.
Yeah.
But not really.
This is what I want to get to, because to me, that's actually exactly the analogy I was going to use. Is in the 90s, it feels like the church and the state became the same. But maybe that was
They started merging in the 90s. Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. And I had a window seat to the evolution, and also the rise of the internet was the other piece. And the merging of business, of both sides of that business, which we were all trained to believe that you just didn't cross.
Yeah.
You didn't cross those lines. It started merging together during that era.
Give me the this is the thing that we've arrived at the most exciting part of this, which is tell me how something or someone show a product. How did it become cool and known everywhere in the 90s? What were the actual sort of backroom mechanics that led to all of a sudden everybody knows this actress? All of a sudden everybody's buying the same.
Well, I'll tell you, the magazine that I worked at after Winning Magazine was Entertainment Football. And aside from Rolling Stone, those were the two magazines that assigned culture. Not just defined, but assigned culture.
Yeah.
We worked in an office where I went to see The Lion King the first week it premiered. I remember Richard Maltz passing by my office and saying, he knew that I was waiting for a story for several hours. And he was like, I have a matinee to go see The Lion King. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah. And we walked over. Yeah, we walked over to the theater because it was pretty close. And I saw The Lion King the first week in premiere. I have thousands of stories like that. That it was so commonplace. You know, I went rollerblading on my lunch hour through Central Park because we were waiting for a story to get back. There was a lot of hurry up and wait in those days. And at Entertainment Weekly, we worked, we worked 15, 16 hours a day. And that was just the norm. And then we would go out drinking at 1 a.m. and be at work 10 a.m. the next morning because Keanu Reeves was coming in to meet with Rebecca Asher Walls for an interview. Yeah. And I just met so many celebrities just walking through the office casually. And people who were not famous and would become famous, or folks who were famous and were about to become more famous. There's a lot of People magazine that has been absorbed from Entertainment Weekly. And that kind of, people didn't always used to be so celebrity focused. There were also really clear lines in those days about which publication was telling which name, sorry. And it's all merged together now. But there was so much of that experience in the few years that I was there. And I was there 2.5 years. Yeah. And it might as well have been a decade. Because we would publish 48 issues a year. On top of all the special publications that we published, I also did an Entertainment Weekly on campus that went out to colleges and universities. I had my own magazine that I designed just a couple of years into being an art director, where I oversee like a dizzying. We all had dizzying responsibilities. And we worked with photographers, we worked with stylists, we worked with the preeminent photographers. The folks who now are shooting a lot of the fashion campaigns started out editorial. Norma G. Roy shot the lava covers in those days, and then he got into the office. Yeah. You know, whenever there was some celebrity he had just been photographed and a photographer who was shot in New York would come in and we gather around and they tell stories and then we'd all just go back to our workstations. You know, we chat with whoever the biggest photographer at that time is. We gather around, we listen to her story, we laugh, we'd look at the selects. Yeah. Because things were shot on film. And so before it was scanned in, we'd talk about the story and, we all had, uh, loops that we could look in and assess whether something was going to get to the next stage or not, or it needed to be redone, or it was okay, but next time. And it was just, The Devil Wears Prada is a film that I've never seen.
Yeah.
It's just
Too close to him.
it's too close, and they don't get a lot of things right.
Yeah.
I'd never seen Devil Wears Prada. As a gay man, that's like sacrilegious. I probably not see The Devil Wears Prada to do. And it's like I've seen scenes and I'm like, that's right, but that's not right.
Yeah.
Even I had a lot of friends that work at Vogue. I still have friends all throughout that industry. And we know what's right and we know what's not in terms of process and how things are done. But that is a pretty kinetic experience to have. It was the coolest.
Yeah.
The coolest. And I was in my 20s at that time. So I had a lot of energy and bandwidth to do lots of crazy ass things, like go to the Lion King at 2 p.m. on a Thursday.
See, so this is the thing that, you have, let's say, even if it was fake at the time, in the 60s, you have this sort of notion of like no advertising and let's say content, to whatever you want to call it, sit apart, and then they interact, but they're separate. And then by the 90s, you have the photographers and the actresses and these people are hanging out at your offices, right?
Stylists and illustrators and artists, fine artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now, if we fast forward another 30 years, we have this thing that's happening. Again, I think this is a massively underreported.
I agree.
That we have had this switch from tastemakers being the people that decide what is cool and what's interesting to people, to the algorithm being what sort of gets to dictate it. And the that shift, I think, defines more of the user experience of being in America today than almost anything. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because I can kind of see, honestly, you can cut it either way for me, and I would agree with you. I can see the argument for like, well, you know what, gatekeepers had biases.
Yes.
And so as a result, only certain kinds of people got to be cool and certain kinds of things got to be cool. But then also, the algorithm feels like shit. And it feels really shitty to be in a country that, in a world, quite frankly, that runs on the whims of the algorithm. It's like praying to the rain gods to hope the algorithm will smile on you, right? That shift, and you see it in the death of the last stand of that were the blogs, right? The blogs where you would have people curating music for you and telling you, no, these are the movies you should really watch. And then slowly but surely, it falls first a chip at a time, and then the whole Berlin Wall crumbles down, right? And you have now, culture feels to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, it feels like it's fully at the whims of the algorithm. And is that been your experience? Warm Intro is brought to you by WeFunder. WeFunder created this thing called the Community Round that lets you raise money directly from your community. So instead of going to VCs and rich people, angel investors, you can go straight to your friends and your family and your customers. And, this is not a traditional ad read. I used WeFunder for my company 3 times. We ran 3 rounds in WeFunder. We raised over $1 million. And I found that it completely changed how everybody felt about our business. Our customers all of a sudden didn't feel like they were just customers. They felt like they were owners in the business. They shopped with us more. They told their friends about us. My team felt like what we were doing was important because our community had shown up to invest in us. I tell every founder I can find to go raise a WeFunder round. Especially for companies that care about community, there is nothing greater you can do than letting that community invest. Go to wefunder.com/join to check it out.
Yeah, yes. But the truth is that it's always going to be at the whim of something. Yeah. It is. It's whim-based culture. That's what culture is. And I being on the inside of an aspect and being one of the engineers of it in my own way, in terms of my own contribution, one thing that was constant throughout my magazine career is that we had language internally to condition everyone to what the larger form of what we were doing was. Whereas marketing was all about the client. For us, it was all about the reader. And we had a way of speaking about what we were doing that everyone had to adopt, which is that we're service providers. I've worked mostly at service magazines. It's something that is anathema to the tech world. A lot of the language that exists right now, they have stolen from that era with none of the context or rationale, or even brain capacity. Well, let me complete the service idea before I turn my disdain to a technical history. Because they deserve it. They deserve it. All lakes, all the bad press right now, they all deserve it. Service. What that meant is that there was no conversation around any choice that was being made without reflecting what the reader was interested in, what they hoped to assess, and how it could apply to their everyday life. And so if it was beauty, it was about inspiration. It's about showing people something that they had not seen before. Yes. And so that's where all the wild creativity came from, that Instagram can't match, or even Pinterest can't match. So many of the best images have come from that era. It's editorial to create fantasy worlds that have nothing to do with reality in order to key in the senses of the people staring at it. It was meant to be aspirational. It was meant to go beyond what was the everyday. And we all felt the responsibility that if you were providing a story that had some metrics of functionality, it had to actually serve purpose. And that's where the kind of fallacy of church and state of advertisers ostensibly couldn't touch what we were doing, but of course they were monitoring everything, and the two sides will always embed each other. And the fashion industry is where all of that nonsense about church and state really existed, as editorial the fashion world could not exist without the fashion houses that existed. They were always invented. But magazines allowed people to think that the space was really past. And then all of that came apart in the 90s because it was always a lie. Because the internet flattened the space between, and people could see. And we had things like advertorials or SIP, special interest publications, and it's where all of that started, merging in the late 80s, early 90s by the Benny, so it was all the same. And we all internally knew that it was going that way also. And a lot of us decided that we wanted to get off the sinking ship because history was starting to repeat itself. So to answer your question now about tech co-opting language, the tech industry has hired all of those people. They're all doing the same fucking thing they were doing in the 90s. They're just making a lot more money, and their souls have left their bodies because they're not working the way that they know they should be. And you have stupid phrases like creatives, content, products that don't mean the thing that those words actually mean. And no amount of repetition is changing the fact that it's an ignoble fit. It doesn't make sense to call those things. And every time I've asked someone, and the people I work with daily know if they're watching this, they're going all laughing. Because I have made this one of my rallying cries as a human being. What does content mean? Yeah, no one can answer that question. And everyone uses it. And whenever I use it, it's just to reflect my lack of respect for anyone who uses that word, because no one can explain. And the closest I've come to someone explaining it to me is that it means nothing and everything. It means shit. It's just a bunch of stuff.
Everything is thought.
It's just shit. It's shit thrown against the screen, and whatever calcifies is what we're staring at. And the rest just runs down and dries off. That is a very valid reflection of what cumulatively I hear from the people I ask. No, legitimately, what does this word?
Yeah. Well, it feels like, to make a food analogy, feels like we've gotten to a place where restaurants are saying, if we put it on a plate, it is food.
Right.
And
there is no critique.
Yeah.
There's no reflection. We just have to take it in. And what it is, and very just honestly, it's that it is a one-sided conversation.
Yeah.
And in terms of how I learned to tell stories, I know it is a two-way conversation. You know, magazines would come out, people would register whether they loved or hated. And then that would then become the filter that we would then look and reassess our decisions last year.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're getting the feedback that this story is not a value. This story is a value. We need to dig in deeper on this front. Folks really are curious about this. They want to know more or less about this thing that we then get to re-look at, reconstitute, and begin the process again of telling a better version or a better story.
My two biggest complaints about what the algorithm has done, let's just call it the algorithm, what the algorithm has done to my life and to everybody's life, is in how it has affected the audience for art, and also in how it has affected the art itself. So just to break that out, right? A critical difference, because I think a lot of people, I'm shocked by how many people still are not aware of this difference being so salient in our lives, right? Between, let's say, the 90s and now. A critical part of your job, the job to so many of these people that worked at these great publications, was to make taste. You were taste makers, right?
You were defining.
Exactly. And it was to stand at the sort of the avant-garde. I mean, there are shifts in American public thinking that were caused by one article in Esquire. It's true. That are caused by one Rolling Stone piece, right? And you stood at sort of the vanguard of taste and sensibility, and you helped push it forward. A critical difference between that world and the world we now live in is the algorithm serves you what you already want, right, what you already know.
Yeah.
And so
everyone's getting dumber as a result.
Exactly, because nothing is pushing us, right? And I think, like, again, that moment that used to exist that some would argue, oh, well, I still get negative comments. No. I don't think people understand, like, negative comments are very different from somebody being a subscriber. I am a subscriber to Entertainment Weekly. I do not like what they just did, and I'm going to write to them about it. That is you being an active participant of the culture versus being like, show me more of what I want.
And that is the difference. It's between participating versus being licensed.
Exactly.
And that is what the difference is. There's so much on the internet that is free, that where you get to just give up your agency in participating in the thing you are reading or taking in or having a response to. And so it's just a bunch of toddlers playing pieces at each other. And it's not an exchange and a conversation about the pros and cons or the merits or demerits of the thing that we're talking about. And so even how people are responding, there is a lack of engagement in the idea of participating there. whether it's civically, whether it's with a story that you read and don't like for this or that reason. And people get to hide on the internet too. You don't have to give your real name. That should just be like baseline. If you couldn't be telling someone that they're trash on the internet, everyone should know your first and last name.
Yes. Yeah.
Because when that happens, a lot of people are more thoughtful about what they then say. And so there's an aspect of responsibility that was inside of those days. And there was a lot that was fractured or broken inside of that process. I saw it, a decisions were made that was a partner. Many of those decisions, I was in those groups. I disagreed with a lot of things. I argued with a lot of my contemporaries at the representation of Kiwi book to like me inside of those meetings. I was frustrated. I was angry a lot. I was elated. I was excited. I had a full experience. I spoke openly with the people that I worked with. And so I left that industry not bitter at all. I would do it all over again. Sakukse.
Yeah. To take the example of music for a second, because I think that's where it's in some ways the most obvious or has been lost, right? I think Pitchfork again was known you for barking in my generation. I think you see it again going back to this idea that we were just talking about a second ago, how it affected the audience and how it affected the artists, right? The audience, I think about the story a lot that I heard. I mentioned one time Spotify was working their recommendation on me. And they realized there was a glitch, it was bug, that would accidentally serve you songs you'd already heard in a part of the product that was supposed to be serenading users. And they found that was actually way stickier as a product than serving people's use guitar. There was this shift that happened where they realized, people see they want boost about, but actually what scratches the itch is like every third song, every fourth song, give him something they've never heard. And then you take the other side of the algorithm, of the music algorithm in his case, songs have gotten short. And a big reason for that is because these tech companies and you shifted the economic model, right? And you get paid by play. You used to get paid for selling albums, and the goal was to make the best possible album. Now you get paid by the number of times a song takes. And so it doesn't matter if it's a 6-minute song or a 2-minute song. Like a Rolling Stone was 10 years, 7 minutes, considered the greatest song of all time. You would be hard pressed to find a top 20 artist today putting out a Sound 8 song. You want to make the shortest, catchy. They've literally overlaid the beats. And we have started to converge because we now know what a catchy song sounds like. And we know how to make it short. So you have to play it over and over. And Taylor Swift buys another course every time you listen to it. I think that, again, it's not understood well enough how much the algorithm, the shift from tastemakers to sort of algorithmic taste has made us all dumber and has sort of made our taste regress to the mean and has made sort of cheapened the art so much, right? Anyway, I guess this is just now becoming a therapy session for me. But bringing this back to you, I want to talk about this. So I guess moving off of the topic of being in this magazine role for a sec.
Actually, I want to say one more thing for Pizla. The use of language. The one last thing I want to say to that, because about language like words, like content, creatives, new language is needed. Yes, language, I'm not equating what I was doing with what is being done right now.
What it is you
I'm saying that what you just said that triggered that. Technology has changed everything. And new words and new meanings are necessary. What I'm reflecting is the laziness and the lack of curiosity in the tech industry defining its lane. Versus just throwing some slop on top of it. and saying it's an apple.
We can go down a rabbit hole of sort of linguistic complaints that I think we both probably have. One of the best bits I've heard from a comedian in the last maybe 10, 20 years, I actually forget who it is, but the bit was that Americans immediately go to the top shelf, there was, and there's no, the word awesome used to be reserved to describe God. Now we use it to describe what the tower is, right? And you see the same form of laziness in how the tech industry has gone about naming its features and what the fuck is an influence? I truly it's the least effort. Nobody stayed up that night to come up with that word. I agree with you on content too. It is such an amorphous term.
And it's one of those words that will define this era, where in 20 years, when we've moved on from this, folks are going to look back so disparagingly of the laziness of this language. And English is so facile. It can take on so much change really quickly in identifying an era of time too. This is that era, like grody in the 80s, that there's so much of that language that if you say it, you're just like, take it back, do that time. It serves no purpose in its current world. And that's one of those words that will just it's not gonna age well.
Yeah. This is not on my sheets of paper. I'm so interested to talk to you about this. There is chatter online. If there's one thing in the world that I'm fascinated by, it is words. And there is some chatter online about the way that Gen Alpha is taking huge. When now, because we got so lazy with our words, and because increasingly words meant nothing, now Gen Alpha is just making sounds. Are you familiar with, this is both Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I guess. Are you familiar with the term loquerquenly?
No, learning it right now.
Loquerquenly is a term that young folks love nowadays, and it is a mix of three words. At first, the term loquently started, which was low-key and genuine.
Hello.
Love it. But then,
I'm actually here for that.
but then,
And I'll explain why.
I think you might like loquerquenly a little less, which is low-key and genuinely, and in between is sandwiched the word Charlie Kirk. Because Gen Alpha and Gen Z just find...
I retract my statement here on.
They just find Charlie Kirk to be a funny sound. It's like the word Dadaism. Like moved on from the words don't even have to have meaning anymore. So
It's Dadaist.
yeah, and and there are so many examples. I mean, when you look at what AI slot really is, it can only exist now. It makes sense that AI comes after social media.
Yeah.
Because we're at a point where, because all words have lost meaning, so the only thing we can laugh at or be amused by are just sounds. Ballerina Cappuccino would make no fucking sense in 1998. It only works in 2026. We're at the weirdest, we're at a post-meaning part of language. We're in this just the strangest era in how we talk, and I think the people to blame are my generation. I think millennials fucked this up because I think we were the ones that got lazy with our language, and so now the generation that comes after us are like, well, there's no point any. Why use any words? Just makes sense. I hate to say it. More earnestly, I love being a millennial. I find that we were the last. We were lazy at times, but we were the last earnest generation. I think earnestness itself became.
It's all scatological.
Yeah, it's God knows what it is now. Bringing this back to your life story.
we could talk about.
Oh, I want to start a separate podcast where I talk to you about language. I have.
No, I'm fascinated by this. I can sound like a crusty grandpa at times, but it really is out of my curiosity. I'm fascinated by it, and I think of myself as a sociologist, just a casual one, in terms of assessing the meaning of how words are used where they are used so erroneously, and how quickly it can become vernacular in an everyday sense when no one knows why.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the piece of like dirt on the floor that people will pick up and then just walk along their way without even knowing why they're using that language.
Have you checked out maxing, which is now attached to everywhere? You can max anything.
Yes.
Right now we're talk maxing.
Yeah. And it's that weird white gay man who is
Clinicular?
yes, who has put this stupid word in the vernacular.
Yeah.
And now everyone is like booty maxing and looks maxing and poster maxing and sign maxing and color maxing. And I mean, it has a certain efficiency.
Yes, it does. It does.
It does.
It does communicate a lot.
It does. And I'm a fan of language like that.
Yes.
That shows, because so much of that, the other culture that defines so much of this, of how language is used, is the Black community. That then the gay community, the white gay community, picks up, bastardizes, and doesn't use it in its correct. And then it just becomes like the plaything of the larger white community to just use, whether there's a reason for them to be using it or not.
Yeah. It's I want to just quickly touch on, again, see, I'm having such a hard time moving off of this topic because I love talking about this with you. One thing, I'm really forcefully trying to get us off the topic of words that bother us, because it's a complete sidebar. I ranted for 10 minutes yesterday to my wife about how much I hate the use of the word addicting, which is people online, food reviewers online, keep calling things they try addicting. The word is addictive, people. It is not addicting. It's
wow, you sound like me.
okay. This is the thing that I really want to talk about. I see no shame.
I say stuff like that all the time.
You should be.
It drives the people I work with crazy. and I also don't care.
That's right. Exactly. Well, I think like as I get older, a thing that I have more and more respect and love for is, I am a member of several communities, as are you, as is everybody. And there are things that I can only talk about with people of that community, right? And as I get older, I find one of my favorite communities is my generation. Because there is a way in which, stomp clap music. Have you heard of stomp clap music? There's a way when that music comes on at a bar, me and my wife and all of our friends, all of our eyes light up, because to us, that is what music sounds like. That is what correct music sounds like, right? There's a way that when Sedona by Houndmouth comes on, or Barcelona by George Ezra comes on, these are songs that are like, now they're relics. Gen Z or Gen Alpha would listen to them and be like, oh my God, classic, or like Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, that kind of vibe is fuck. But for us, because that was the peak, that was peak culture when we were at our prime, let's say. I don't love that word, but that's the one I have right now. And I think I used to be more self-conscious about it. I used to feel like, oh man, I'm doing this thing. I'm being such a millennial about it. And now I'm like, no. Yeah, I'm a millennial. We are all a product of the generation that we
absolutely
fell into. Yeah. And I love.
There's a point where we all start referencing ourselves inside of that.
Yes.
Where it seems like it's about those folks over there. Whether it's the group ahead or behind us. And then we realize that actually it's us too.
Yeah.
And we can start referring to ourselves as the tribe that we are. And there's a comfort inside of that. Start looking and talking to other people in your age bracket, no matter how old or young you are, that feels comforting
Yeah.
because you realize you're moving through something collective and that it's not just about you anymore.
Yeah. I on that point, the part of your life story that I think is the most impactful and leads to this conversation and leads to everything you're doing now is this shift that happens for you. And you've talked about how this happened a little later for you than it does for some folks. Is that moment when you switch from being a tastemaker to being an artist. In working on this, I found this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, another famous transcendentalist that I love. And I thought it really I'd forgotten about this quote, then I found it and I love it. It's love of beauty is taste. The creation of beauty is art. And I think I see that moment in your life where you go from, well, I am a lover of, an appreciator of, a commenter on, a discusser of beauty to being, no, I am going to be a creator of beauty. Tell me about that change. I know it overlaps for you with moving to San Francisco, a beautiful but strange city. Yeah, tell me about deciding you're no longer going to be talking about the art of others and the beauty of others, but be making your own art and beauty. What was that like?
I have been hiding behind other people's creativity for years. And I started understanding that there was, and described it, but there was another person inside of me. That 20 years after graduating university and learning all of these crafts and different ways of thinking, that I had not actually submitted to what I had learned.
Yeah.
That I was still off to the side and the full me was not being present. And I was regarding my life and seeing the ways that I had been kind of lying to myself. And one of which is that I was a mentor to a lot of artists. I spent a lot of time developing other people's crafts.
Yeah.
I had made a lot of other people very successful and considered it, at the time, my greatest accomplishments. And then I reached a period in my early 40s where it's something that my male friends of a certain age talk about. My biological clock started going on. Men, we have that too. And it's in your early 40s, guys. And it's not pretty.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily a somatic change. Your body changes in such a way that you start understanding that you are finite. And the way that men are made and bred starts shifting. And I was like, what am I doing on Earth right now? I had achieved a kind of success, but then I realized I wasn't being honest with myself completely about the kind of success that I wanted. I had always wanted to be an artist, always. And I had just turned my immigrant brain on, and the rest of me was just atrophying. And it started affecting me. It started affecting my mood, my temperament, my mode, I was starting to be inside of my family again. I had just reunited with my father after 30 years of us not being Jigga's lights. And I was just looking at everything. And a really seminal event. I had not been back to Grenada in about 10 years, and my grandmother for her 90th birthday called me one day and said, this time events happened in my life, including a trip to Mexico City, that became the setting of an awakening I had. But at that point, when I got to that location, I had already spent a year, close to a year, in a misery of my own making. And I knew there wasn't external. I knew there was it. And so by the time I got to that point, I knew that there wasn't. I looked at everything around me. It's like, oh no, it's not them, it's me. Oh, all of this is me. And by the time I turned to my then heart therapist, said, I need to fire all of my clients in San Francisco over again. Because every cell in my body is speaking. And so that was just it.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago.
But I want to frame where we're at in the story because I think it is important and it dictates what we're going to talk about. You know, you go from the way I hear your story, you go from being very much a foreigner to culture, then coming in and becoming a husband, not feeling part of it, to then joining the machinery of culture, right? And machinery of taste and of beauty. And then realizing, okay, I have not only now been supporting it, now I want to go out and be the producer of it. So to me, that journey is just so interesting. The thing that I want to talk to you about, now we've arrived at this point in your story where you are a producer of culture, you're a producer of art. What you find beautiful, what you find worthy of being your muse is very interesting to me. And I want to kind of ask you about that. You know, I'm going to use a big word, which is not something I'm known for on this podcast, but the quintessence. What is the sort of quintessence? What is that essential quality that makes something worthy of your attention, worthy of your art? How do you think about that now?
That's a really great question. I think the quintessence has been pretty consistent. I am interested in identity, and in the fullest meaning of the word. I don't mean it in the way that it's currently discussed. I'm a traditionalist with words. Like, if I'm talking about something, you can look it up in the dictionary, and that's what I'm talking about. I also know, based on who I'm talking to, whether I'm going to talk about the cultural aspect of the word, the current vernacular, or its classic dictionary meaning. And for me, identity is about the either self or societal generated mask that we as human beings carry with us. Like, who are you is what coats everything we do. Just everything. It's not even that complicated. It's very deep. It's not complicated. I can dissect that 1,000 different ways and do 1,000 different versions of it. But I am curious about identity of people, places, and things.
Yeah.
And that is always the spark of my curiosity. Who are you? What? Who? And who the fuck are you?
I am also fascinated by that word, and I'm a little quirky fascinated by that word, and just how it has been bastardized and morphed in modern culture, but especially political discourse, right? But on the topic of identity, I think I want to talk about the art project of yours I think most people will have heard of already, right? And most people listening to this, which is Illustrated Black History. I want to just tell me everything. Tell me how it first came to you, how it evolved, and what it ended up. Because it was a 4-year period that you worked on it. What was that?
6 years.
6.
I worked on that project for 6 years, and it is currently evolving into a march through time. And so this is a 20-year project that I'm working on, of which there's a third component that has not been addressed in any public way. And so I'll be Beyonce about it and not say anything else about that piece. But I will tell you how all of this started, because once again, it's a way that my brain works. And so much of it is spoken. But with me, there's always an iceberg underneath public view. There's always another component that is not, that I actively will not speak about. until I think the time is right to bring the rest of my collaborators into, and I think it just comes from my life and the way that I work. I trust myself. And so I don't feel the need to litigate everything that I'm thinking about, because I'm having a pretty neutral conversation with myself about it. I wouldn't get to a place. And it's taken me a long time to realize it's actually not control. It's just self-regard.
Yeah.
It's not about control. It is, I really enjoy dialoguing with myself about my own ideas. And so the original idea came about right after I got back from Mexico City, where I thought, I am going to blow up my whole life right now and restart an aspect of myself that has been underneath the surface for 20 years, which is that I think I'm a fully formed artist. Not just I think I'm an artist. I think I'm a fully formed artist. And there was a confidence with which I can look back and think, that's crazy. Because it is crazy. There's no part of the story that I tell where I'm like, oh, I was so gassed up on my own fumes that I was just convinced. I just knew that there was a full individual, a three-dimensional other person that was just quietly sitting and waiting for his turn. And that wanted this guy to exhaust himself so that he could then look and see just really plainly that this is just here. It's been here the whole time. And it's the most honest person. The person that is divorced from worrying about what his contemporaries think, or that I will be shepherding someone else's career. Like, what is that like? And I was thinking about it even at that time. What is it like to devote all of this energy to myself? I had never done that before.
Yeah.
I had never only focused on myself. I was always more focused on others. And the last 10 years has been the first time in my life I have devoted so much energy to myself. I've never done that before. And so that felt daunting. It felt like it means that the days of lying to myself about most things are just over.
Yeah.
Because that's what being a real artist is. It means you can't lie to yourself. And so for me, that was like a big seminal moment. It means that my life is going to be different. My daily conversations with myself will be different. There is no space in between my perception of myself and my rendering of myself. The sketch to finish has to be right next to each other. And so my synapses just snapped and fired, and I died and came back to life, really. And so came back. The first project I did was a self-assigned daily painting of a Black history pioneer that I did. I ended up doing daily. I ended up writing, illustrating, selecting, editing. And during that very seminal month, all of this idea, all of everything that I ended up doing came in that month. No one believes that.
Yeah.
But this whole idea was just fully formed. And I realized I'd let myself be terrified enough to dream about something outside of my own consideration of myself. And I thought of the exhibition, the truth of this telling, which I only started telling publicly recently, is I thought of the exhibition first. And realized no one knew who the fuck I was as an artist. And so I had to reverse engineer myself as an artist on the national stage.
Yeah.
And I was so clear that that artist was there that I crazy knew that this book was going to do that. And that everything I was as an artist would be inside of the book. And the book would set up at the exhibition. And that's what it's done. Yeah. And it meant that I could not hide anymore. And it also meant that I had to be strategic. And now I was doing it too. I couldn't just be an artist. I had to be a really clever artist too. I had to select. Even then I knew, even as I was working, you could go back in that original series and you can see all the different styles inside. Yeah. And in the midst of my own engagement with that, I had to deal very personally, and I'll be I mean, receive my community freaking out. We didn't know this about you. What is wrong with you? You've just been capable of doing this the whole time. Like, seriously. And I've told this story a few times. My dear friend Lisa called me and she said, you make art emotional. I could see your emotions in your lines. And I was like, shh, don't tell anybody. I was literally like, no one's supposed to say that.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're putting your emotional awareness of the person. It's inside of your line work. Yeah. And I said, yes, that's true. It's true. And I love that you can see that. And that's how I'm going to be making art. It's going to be my emotional state. Yeah. Inside of all of this. Because she's like, some of your line is really raw and some of your lines are really timid. And it's your assessment of the person, but it's also you who are putting yourself inside those portraits. And I literally was like, don't look at me. Well, okay, so were you able to see this quickly? And she was like, because you are fully formed.
Warm Intro is produced and edited by Jiwon Moon and Alex Seiko. Hosted by me, Chai Mishra.